Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Arant. I am an IEC or Independent Educational Consultant based in the Austin, Texas metropolitan area. And this is the first in a series of three webinars I'll be hosting on select topics on athletic recruitment as well as college admissions. And for this one, we are talking about all things camps, clinics, showcases, you name it. And I am joined by three coaches from both the Division III and Ivy League levels. And if we've crossed paths before, I don't really like to pontificate on the state of higher education or college admissions or athletics. I kind of want to get to the topic at hand. So that's why I go direct to the source, the coaches, the players, and the college admissions folks themselves. So before we go ahead and get started with that topic, I will let them introduce yourselves. So, Joe, you want to kick things off?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Joe Aquaviva, at both D3 and D1 experience. I was at Tufts University for 5 years as the assistant and associate head coach, and then I was at Franklin and Marshall College where I was the head coach, and now I'm at Princeton with the women's program.
Dan?
Yep, thanks for having me, Matt. Again, Dan DeCenzo. I'm currently the head football coach at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. I've went to Williams College, a team in the league, graduated in '01, and then coached at Trinity College, Brown University, back at Williams, my alma mater, and now been at Wesleyan for 15 plus years.
Okay. And Mo?
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me. I'm Maureen Hurt. I'm the head women's basketball coach at Denison University, just outside Columbus, Ohio. I'm originally from Bloomington, Indiana, and went to Kenyon College and got my start as a coach at Oberlin College before getting the head coaching job here at Denison.
Are you wearing your national championship any gear tonight?
I don't have anything on right now,
Okay.
but yeah, yeah.
For any folks that weren't know, she just got her first national championship as the Denison women's coach. So I wanted to kind of give you a quick plug before we go ahead and get started.
I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so when we think about this topic, right? Camps, clinics, showcases, there's a bunch out there, right? So if you go on a school's athletics page, you can literally see almost every program has something attached to it, whether it's on their campus itself or they're part of a larger consortium, and gets pretty confusing about this whole process. So, Mo, can you kind of tell us what are the differences, if any, between those terms, camps, ID camps, clinics, prospect days, showcases? Are they interchangeable? Are there key kind of semantical differences? How do, I guess, students and families kind of approach this process and kind of figure out which one is which?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I do think they are used interchangeably sometimes between camps, clinics, and showcases, but I would say camps are typically like you talked about, like the Ivy League elite camps are really good on the women's basketball side. It usually involves some level of instruction and some level of evaluation. I feel like clinics, you're looking for maybe a little bit more on the training side, more development camps, trying to improve your skills. Showcases, those are typically, I feel like, on the women's basketball side, all just showing your play, live basketball. Not a lot of teaching involved. Not as maybe as much one-on-one attention. I think showcases are usually bigger, but I would be aware that like I think some institutions use those interchangeably. But the ones that we really like on my side at least are the camps because you get a little bit of the instruction aspect of it, but you also get the live play and being able to evaluate in those settings.
And so maybe follow up on that about like the campus-based camps or clinics, Mo. How does that kind of fit in, if any, with, I guess, the admissions process? Not like an explicit connection, but how do, I guess, these admission offices, how do they incorporate something like that when they have all these potential applicants on their campus for something else? How do they kind of integrate that with the work you're doing on the athletic side?
Yeah, I think it's being able to promote some of those camps. So like if we're holding one, just making sure that the admissions office is aware that we're running those as well. And it gives people an opportunity to get in front of us on our campus in those settings. But then for us as a recruiting tool, we do go to other campuses and being able to go to Princeton's campus and see some of the people that are attracted to those high academic institutions. And there are some cases, right, where Princeton is specifically looking at some of those women's basketball players, but they can't take all 70, 80, maybe 90 kids to come play at Princeton. And it gives us as high academic Division III coaches an opportunity to have a group of people that are really interested in a high academic experience in one place. And we were talking earlier about showcases, right? So in the basketball world, it's AAU. You have 80 to 100 courts in one of these huge convention centers. We would really like to use the camps and the clinics to identify who we then go watch at those showcases, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's essentially kind of narrowing the funnel down, right? So you're not just overwhelmed by just the sheer mass of humanity that are at these huge tournaments, right?
Exactly.
So Dan, since you're coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, because football doesn't have that ubiquitous club scene as pretty much every kind of college sport, right? Like whether it's AAU or lacrosse and soccer, all those sports that have a very kind of sophisticated, extensive kind of club aspect to it. For you as football, how does that work in terms of like the timing? So when should these student athletes start seriously considering attending one of these camps, whether it's football specifically or just in general in this process for those students?
Yeah, I would say the high academic Division II and III schools for football start recruiting 2027s around February 1st of this past year. So, probably like midway through their junior year of being a 2027 with guys making commitments. Our league cannot make an offer until July 1. Kids will commit anytime from July 1 up through pretty much January 31st on the back end of it. It's a full year cycle. With these camps, similar to what Maureen said, the Ivy League, they'll do a bunch of one-day camps, and Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the list goes on of all eight of them, will primarily have about 1,000 plus kids come to these camps. I'm not a math major, but Harvard will have 1,200 kids come through, and they'll take 20 kids out of those 1,200 to their camp. So if I'm an outside kid looking at Harvard, they're not going to have any other Ivy League schools there because that's a conflict of interest. But they will have some high academic Division III schools there, but less and less are going because there's other areas where these schools can go and have a better kind of experience to get kids and get information out of. So I think as a student athlete, I'll get a list from an email from a student and they'll say, I'm going to these 15 camps. And in my mind, I'm going, this kid's wasting his time. He's wasting his money. And he really could be back home training with his high school, training with his team, getting better, and just not wasting all those time there. I think you really want to target 2 to 3 camps that are really going to showcase your talent the best you can, make the most connections with schools, and really talk to the kids maybe in the class above you of what camps they've went to. But right now, I'm being not picking on Harvard or Princeton or Yale. They might only have 10 outside schools there. So you want to know what schools are going to be there, so you're seen by those schools. Now, if you're talented enough and you're looking at Yale, they make it feel like ahead of time that you're their top guy when you come to this camp. And then you have to read between the lines. Did they pull you aside? Did they have lunch with you? Did they do something different with you than they did with the other 150 kids there that day to make it where you're really one of their prospects? Where we start the 2027 prospect February 1st, the Ivy League now in football is already actively visiting 2027s. And by June 1st, my guess is of the 8 schools, they will have 20 commitments each by June 1st of this year. So it is that fast of a process on that end. That only helps the high academic D2s and D3s like myself, where now there's less spots at these Ivy League schools. These kids that have done their homework, like being on this call, know that there's not a lot of spots left at these Ivy League schools. So they better start broadening their search or look at other places so they're not left without a spot. We started the red and black camp, and the best thing I did was name it the red and black camp and not the Wesleyan camp, probably like 8 years ago. And last Sunday in April, we had 150 kids in the morning and 150 kids in the afternoon. We maxed it at both. We had over 100 college coaches here, probably 40 different high academic Division II and III schools. Division I schools cannot go on the road in football until June 1st. So it really jumpstarts your recruiting for these kids. We had kids come in from over 25 states. The thing that we do a little bit differently is we break camp 3 times for these kids to talk to coaches, and we rotate where they go each time we break for the 10 minutes so they get to, these coaches aren't chasing you around at the end of the day. So I think our coach really like that. The parents like it in the sense that, they get to see the schools they want to talk to and they're not chasing around at the end of the day either. We then send out all the contact information of every coach that was there to all the students that night. So that night, or give me 24 hours after camp, I send it out so they get the 100 coaches that were there, their names, their school, their position, and their email. We height, weight, we test them in the 40, the 5, 10, 5, and all their academic, Twitter, huddle, any information we have on them, we send all the coaches that night. So within 2 hours after camp. So we're pretty efficient. So I think a lot of these schools like coming to our camp every year. And again, we definitely it's a benefit to me because our staff's working with the kids. We're previewing all this film ahead of time. So definitely huge benefits for us. We'll have another 500 kids come in June. So we'll have over 800 student athletes on our campus. So we're one of the biggest football non kind of Division I camp in the country right now. So this again, if I can't win and find 20 kids out of those 800, you can fire me. But we're doing a pretty good job finding those guys. But we're now having our summer camp. We'll have over 80 colleges at it. Again, it is no hit on an Ivy League camp. I just think if you're going to the Dartmouth or Princeton or Yale camp, you better think that you're going to get an offer for one of those schools because they'll only have 10 outside schools at it. And a lot of times they're done when the camp cycle comes around in June. The high Division II and Division III schools in football are from early June through mid-July. We're at camps probably 20 days. So it's definitely a busy time for us and definitely a big part of the evaluation process for us on that end.
So, following up on that, Dan, from the student and the family's perspective, are they able to see before they register which all of the schools are going to be there, or is there just like a general sense of, okay, we'll have these schools kind of generally come in, or do you have
You
a
know,
strict kind of list of attending schools that they can know before they
I
officially kind
think a
of pick
lot of
one?
the schools say that like we're going to be at the camp and we're not. We've really narrowed it down to we try to go to Columbia, Brown, and Yale because location wise, to us and Wesleyan, it makes the most sense.
Yeah,
We have connections on all those staff, so we have a little bit more access to the information than if we maybe go to a different Ivy League staff. A lot of the kids come through a lot of them. But my suggestion to a student is in football, the New England Elite Camp is uppers and pads. It's the end of June. They have 1,400 kids. So really, we just go up there as a staff to shake hands and kind of see the top kids, kind of like Maureen said, of, hey, we've already evaluated them. Let's just go make sure we see these top 25 kids. But really tough to evaluate when there's 1,400 kids on 25 different fields to find those kids. Then our camp is 2 days later. We have the 100 coaches, but we max each session at 150. So they really get reps, they get seen. That format's pretty conducive to it. And then we really just try to find other camps where we can get the information readily, pretty quickly. And we know that those coaches work with outside coaches really well. But again, I think it's tough for these student athletes and parents because Harvard will list that these 40 schools are going and maybe 10 show up.
yeah.
And in the end, they're Harvard, so they don't care. They don't really care what you think in the end. So tough out there, but I know in a lot of sports, the camps, the clinics, the showcase. I mean, it's a huge part of the recruiting now and being seen.
Yeah. Okay. So shifting gears a little bit from we talked to two sports in which it's film based. It's kind of like the dichotomy, film based versus time and distance, right? So Joe, you representing the time based sports. How does that work? Quite frankly, with a camp like that, when you already know kind of what their times are in the certain strokes, like what does a time based sports camp look like for you at Princeton?
Sure. Yeah, I love numbers. I love running numbers. I love looking at data. I love looking at progressions. It's very tangible stuff. So during the recruiting process, like it's a fun thing to do. But ultimately, like in the recruiting process, like what it really narrows down to is like what's the kind of person that's going to fit our team. So when it comes to camps, and this is true for every place I've been at, like we're looking for the right people. So it's pretty neat to see people in an environment that's not just a swim meet. That's not just a phone call. It's like, hey, you're watching them practice. You're seeing how they go through the process, how they treat other people. Like, are they good teammates? Are they good people? So, I don't think it adds much to the timepiece because I think that's kind of set. But I think it adds a lot to like what's the character of those people. So I think that's the joy of that. And I think another piece is like swimming's a very small world. I feel like most college athletics are a very small world, but like we do a lot of like, hey, I saw this kid, like they're really good. They might not be a good fit for me, or they might not be fast enough for me, but like you might send them to their contact to someone who you know is going to be a good fit, or you think might be a good fit. And I think that goes a long way because that'll come back to you too. So I think it's a lot of intangible pieces. But I wish it was as easy as numbers on the board, but it really doesn't work that way, especially with team cohesion. So it's a bit of the more nitty gritty stuff that really makes the impact, though.
And even with something as kind of concrete as times, right? You're still looking at these student athletes and projecting them out 3 or 4 years, right? So they might seem like on paper good, but then if you're able to kind of analyze their strokes, like if they have all the athleticism in the world and their strokes are a little bit off, okay, you can work with them and that makes the time even faster, right? So it may on its face seem, okay, this person could maybe compete for us here, but if I see they have some mechanical issues, but they have all like the those peak physical attributes, okay, that can tell us quite a bit differently than if we just saw the number itself. You
Oh,
mentioned kind of the potential.
100% potential in our sport is like everything.
Yeah.
And that's, I missed, there's one person I miss on, and I remember like I found her in a camp and I was like, this person's going to be really, really good. Ended up going to a rival school, making NCAAs. And it's like, it's finding the potential is such a cool thing when it happens. But yeah, it's the more you can watch them in their element, I think the easier it is.
And even more importantly, how do they react when something goes well versus when something goes wrong, right? Because not everything is going to be peaches and cream when they're in college. So if they're reacting negatively, overtly so for something like that, then how you kind of think about another kind of projection and forecasting is when more adversity hits, how are they going to react? If you already see it kind of like a microcosm of that behavior when you're going to a camp like that.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think it's true at every level, but like our team spends a lot of time with other team members. So
Yeah.
like if you have someone who's always bringing people down or like can't handle pressure situations, like and they all learn and grow, like that's a piece of it. But like if you have people who are bringing other people down, like that's not the people that we want around our team members because they're the ones they're spending most of their time with. So I guess like the more you can see that, like it's a pretty cool thing.
Okay. So I think we kind of hit on this just a little bit, but I want to kind of go a little bit deeper on how these student athletes and their families should approach this part of the process, right? So Mo, when there's so many options out there, we listed like there's camps and all these literally all across the country. How, I guess, when you talk to families early in this process, how do you advise them on how to use that information when making the choice? Is it going to be purely geographic based? Is it going to be dictated by the student's interest in the school? Like, how do you kind of advise those folks on how to narrow that funnel, so to speak, when there's so many kind of options to choose from?
Yeah, there's so many different things out there, and I think it's really hard for families at this point sometimes to understand when it's a money grab and when it's actually an evaluation tool for institutions. And so you kind of have to sift through that. I really encourage people to like come up with a list of schools that you're genuinely interested in, and emailing them a personalized email goes a long way because us as coaches, we get tens of thousands of emails all of the time from recruiting services. And but the ones that always stand out to me are very like personalized email. Like, they did a little bit of research on Denison. They know what our program's been doing, how we've been doing, and they've done a little bit of research about our culture or searched our social media. Those always really stand out to me. And those are the kids that I'm like, definitely come to like our elite camp. And, here's an opportunity to get in front of our staff. And those are the ones that I'm like, we really need to make a concerted effort to go watch them at these camps. But I think the beautiful thing about being at a high academic school is we get to recruit nationally. So it makes it easy but hard at the same time, right? Like you have Ivy League camps with us being in Ohio. People have to come from all over the country to get to those. But then if you're looking to stay maybe a little bit closer to home, finding some camps and some institutions that are a little bit more regional is totally doable. But the thing that we love about it at Denison is we know like if there's a kid from California that's going to, Yale, Princeton, Harvard's elite camp, we have a good chance that that person may be wanting to travel a little bit further for college. So being able to do that and to go to those camps and know that anybody who's coming from all over might be interested in traveling a little bit further for the next 4 years is really nice. But I think like the personalized emails and trying to really figure out where there might be a genuine interest, going to those elite camps I think is great. And then like some of the ones that promote like, hey, this is a high academic showcase, doing a little bit of research about the people. I think Dan kind of mentioned this, like talking to other people that have maybe like been in your area, like where have they gone and where have they had success, and doing a little bit of conversations with other people that have been through the process, maybe at your high school or surrounding areas, to be able to determine what camps did those people go to and how did they get seen. So doing a little bit of research that way might help too.
Okay. Thank you. So Dan, this kind of popped in my head as we were talking about for your sport specialists, right? You think about like your kickers, your punters, and all that. Oftentimes there's a separate kind of session within the camp. I was wondering, can you kind of walk us through, there any place kickers out here or punters, or how do they kind of approach this process in contrast to maybe a lineman or a defensive back or
Yeah.
wide receiver? How does that fit?
Yeah. First on Maureen's point, I think it's a great one where if you're a sophomore in high school and you're looking to play a college sport and you see in the last 4 or 5 years from your high school, someone went to a good academic school in your sport, I would reach out to that family and I would say, what camps did you go to? What clinics did you go to? Because it's specific to your sport. So, and they'd say, hey, don't go to this or go to this. This was really good. Or this one was bad. And I think that can really help getting that firsthand, thing of the family that went through it a couple years before you that has your best interest in heart. As far as the specialist camps, kicking, punting, go for football, if a school runs 8 camps and then they do one specialist camp, no outside coaches are going to that. There's no way I'm going to send a staff member when they do 20 days of these things to just go to a punting camp.
Yeah.
So they're poorly attended by coaches. So I would not waste your money. I would try to find a big camp or a regular camp session that does a 20-minute punting and kicking showcase in the middle. It's only 20 minutes, but 20 minutes is a long time when you get, 20 kickoffs or 20 field goals in during that period and all coaches are watching. So as a head coach, I lose sleep over a long snap or over kicking over punting. My assistants don't care as much. I definitely care. So we are actively watching those kids at those camps, but we know that we're going to put ourselves in position to be at 3 types of these showcases and see 50 kids at those positions with good academics. So we'll be able to find them from that. But I think when
Okay.
you go to a specialist only, it's a 3 hour camp. No coach is going to go sit there for three
You can
hours.
only do so much with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't suggest that.
Okay. So now kind of thinking about, well, I think we touched upon this a little bit. I think Joe, you and I we talked about kind of how are they acting in terms of like the intangibles. So for all of you, like, do you have some, I guess, clear do's and don'ts for how to act at these camps? I guess how to act before, I guess, whether it's reaching out to you, but we kind of talked about the personalized email, and then also following up. Like, what advice do you have for those student athletes thinking about pursuing college athletics that want to, I guess, make as good of an impression as possible with you as coaches? So I guess Joe, we can start with you. We haven't heard from you in a while.
Sure. Yeah, I think following up is great. The personalized touch, 100%. I mean, when I read an email, that's clearly just copy and pasted. Like it doesn't mean as much. I think during the camp, like you know, appreciation goes a long way too. So like I think, being yourself, yes, that's really important. Like try to figure out who you're trying to develop into, keep that important. But the appreciation, like how you're treating the coaches, how you're going through it. But I tie it into just the full recruiting process of like you really need to sell yourself at every level. I think I was in high school, they told us like, on the we're driving down the highway, like when you see a billboard from McDonald's, let's say, like the first billboard you see, like, maybe you're not interested in like the seventh billboard, you might be like, well, maybe. So I think a lot of it is selling yourself. So after the camp, it's hey, checking in, coach, like here's the camp, here's what I learned. You check back in, like you might have to send a few emails before you get a real good response. So I think it's making sure you're following up and not being discouraged if you don't get like the answer you want, but just keeping in touch and staying transparent.
Yeah, just kind of carrying on from that. Definitely have an email of information you want to get to your top schools. And I don't think you're bothering us by, updating us. We're recruiting football kids. We have kids in track right now, and a kid will send me an email. Hey, coach, I was just at your camp last weekend. I ran the 400 and the 100 this weekend. These are my times. And obviously, if they're good times, that matters, but just updating coaches that way shows that you're definitely interested in that school. To Maureen and Joe's points before is making it personalized, where you've done some homework on the school, I think matters. I think that's a big piece of it as well. But really, we tell football kids all the time, at the end of your junior year, you want to have your transcript through your junior year in a PDF, not a shot on your phone that's blurry and we can't read. A transcript through your junior year on a PDF ready to go. We want your senior class schedule. And we want you to challenge yourself in the classroom the best you can with still getting the same grades you're getting now or better. Don't take four APs and get three C's and be like, I took four APs. Great, you got three C's. We can't get you into school. Okay. Get the same grades you're getting now or better. So transfer through your junior year, your senior class schedule. The third part is these admissions office, all of us are gonna send over your stuff for a pre-read to admissions. Well, the more information you give us, the more information admissions has to make a decision. So put a resume together and it's going to say Denison on my hometown, my contact info. Then it's going to say sports I play, clubs I'm in, extracurricular stuff I do, community service I've done. If music, art, whatever is a big part of your life, religion, put that in there. They want to know what you're doing outside of your time of academics, essentially. We know the time if you want to be a college basketball player, swimmer, football player, the time you're putting into those sports. But really showcase yourself the best you can. If you have a writing sample that shows some hardship you've had in your life, put that in there. The more information, the better. We send over to our admissions office, and they really look at everything. And that's a positive in my situation here at Wesleyan. They look at leadership, they look at background, they look at all that type of stuff more than just their transcript. But challenge, we definitely look at rigor. We were pre-COVID, we were test optional. So rigor in the class schedules you're taking really matters. If you can take multiple APs, sophomore, junior, and senior year, I would do that. I would challenge yourself the best you can with still getting good grades. If you're not good at math, don't take AP calculus and let it drain you 70% of your time for an average grade and your other classes are affected. Take APs in classes you're going to thrive in and do really well, and take the level down in that class you might not be as good in, to showcase your talent the best you can. But I think a lot of kids get bad advice. They take bad classes their freshman, sophomore year. Their rigor isn't good enough. They get on a certain path, and then we can't get them into school. So I think those classes and kind of having a plan for your 4 years of high school really matters if you want to be an elite academic school.
So before Mo, I hear from you. Dan, you mentioned pre-reads, right? I was wondering because I've done them hundreds of them myself when I was at Franklin and Marshall, and I know kind of the process well. I was wondering, I guess for you three, you can answer it, I guess. How much information do you share with admissions about the students' athletic kind of chops and in conjunction with all the things we talked about, the academic rigor, the interests, like the multi dimensional applicant? How does that figure into the process? And do you mention specifically, oh, they've been to these camps for us. I've seen them on the road this many times. I feel like they're almost at the commitment level. How much of that information do you share with admissions during that pre-read process?
Not much on the athletic side. I think we're putting them through to really find where they are academically. And
Mhm.
I think they know if we're putting them in that they're an athlete that we have a lot of interest in, with that stuff. But again, the more information you give us, I'm going to take the good information and I'm going to share it with our admissions office. The information I don't think is good enough, we're not going to share that stuff. So the more you can give a coach, honestly, if you're a top kid for him, the better it is.
Yeah, I would just add, like, when it comes to the pre process, we're pretty cut and dry in terms of like your transcript in your senior classes. Like Dan said, maybe adding a resume or some extracurriculars, we have an additional ability to put that into the file for admissions to get to know. But what happens for us is we have to make a case for the student athlete when they apply early decision. That's typically the timeline that we operate in at Denison. That's where we have the ability to have a little bit of like, hey, this is the impact that this player would have in our program. We have a little bit of a rating system at Denison where we can put that information in. So that's when we would include, like, hey, we think this person is a good fit for Denison, not just because of what they do basketball wise. We'll list out some of those accomplishments, but who they are as a person, how they would fit into the community, what would they be like as a student holistically at Denison. That's when we do it, but that's typically after they have applied early decision and making a case for them to be admitted to Denison.
Yeah, Joe, how about the pre-read process at the Ivy? Like how is that different than the two other folks we talked about or we talked with about this process and the inclusion of athletic specific information?
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry on the academic piece. Like it's really got to be a special case if you're going to make an argument, but really the academics have to stand for themselves. I think that's a big difference from the other D3 schools I've been at. Like maybe there's some wiggle room. Like at the end of the day, like it's still Princeton. You have to be good enough to not only get in, but then do well here. So like it's not as much of a conversational piece.
And Matt, my time with the Ivies for football, it's just an academic index. So they take your
Yeah.
SAT and ACT score slash combine it with your class rank or your transcript is. So for simple terms, if you were a 1200 SAT, you would drop the zero and you get 120 points. The most you could have a transcript if you're straight A's would be, say, 80 points. So say you had a 75 there and 120, you'd be a 195 AI. So it didn't matter what state you were from, what religion you were, what ethnicity you were, you're a 195 AI. And every sport has a different AI they have to hit, and their average of 5 kids, 8 kids, 10 kids in football, it's 30. So there were 4 bands. But the big piece with that is, a school might say, hey, we need you to go up 3 points, which means, we need you to retest the SAT or ACT. I think when a school is specific with you about what they need, then you're a real candidate. When the school's like, hey, we want you to retest, we want you this, and they're
Yeah.
vague, you're not one of their guys. But when they're specifically talking bands and points and stuff like that, I think that tells you, hey, they definitely want me if I can, make this jump into that area.
In the same way you talked about when you're at the camps and the coach takes you aside and they tell you specific information,
Yeah.
that's to kind of get the gears turning in the same way. So, oh, we need you to score this on the SAT or ACT, as opposed to, okay, take it again and best of luck. There's kind of, you can read between the lines in terms of the
I love
communication.
I love dealing with families. I'm at the Penn camp and this parent's in from Florida and he can tell that those coaches have no interest in their kid. And he starts looking around at the other shirts that are there and says, okay, I got to start broadening our search because we thought we were going to Penn. And why wouldn't he? He's a 17-year-old kid that hasn't been through the process, that parents aren't in the business. So why would they know? It's a very complicated business with that stuff. So
Yeah.
this parent was smart enough to be like, all right, I need to start looking at other places. I want to talk to other schools. And then he reached out pretty heavily. Those same kids in that same situation that didn't go to those camps, they find that hard reality maybe 5 months later, and then they're
Yeah.
really behind. So I think going to those camps, is a positive in that sense where at least you know where you fit and then where you can realign your college search a little bit.
Okay, great. I think that's a good note to end on. So now we will open up the proverbial floor to questions. So feel free to utilize the chat function at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions for our panel here. Or you can unmute yourself or even turn on your camera, whichever is easiest for you. Well, if there aren't any questions right now, Dan, Mo, and Joe and I will stay on this call for a few minutes. But if you don't, thank you for joining us. And like I said, this is the first of three that we're doing. And the next specific one for athletics will be about pre-reads. So we talked about that briefly, but I'll be talking with a athletics liaison at Denison, where Mo's at, and we'll just go through the process and we'll literally do a mock pre-read for some applicants that I've kind of created out of thin air. So that'll be in May. But if you don't have any questions, thanks for joining us. And like I said, we'll stay on for just a few more minutes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Marie McQuaid. I'm an IEC, and I don't work with athletes very often. So, I mean, part of why I like don't have any questions is because this was all like a lot of information it's almost like you kind of have to know what you guys are talking about to like fully understand it. So, for me, I was like, I don't even know where to begin to ask a question. So, um, like just really, really basic stuff. Like I don't understand like the difference between like a camp and a clinic and a showcase like that. When you guys went through that really, really fast. And so I couldn't really absorb that. And like, I have kids that they've gone to camps. What kind of camps are we talking about? Is this like just a day that is specifically about recruitment? Or is this like a camp where kids are actually learning skills in a sport and then coaches happen to show up? Like I just don't understand the basics. So and if this is too basic, like I can just like get off
Well,
this.
I can kick that off, and Mo, if you want to make us elaborate a bit more. So we kind of mentioned that these terms are interchangeably, unfortunately, in a lot of respects. But when I think about like an ID clinic or camp, that's usually a single campus in which the
And what do you
students
mean by ID? What is
That's
ID?
just the word they like identifying prospective student athletes. That's just the term they use.
Okay.
So it's at one campus and you have
Uh-huh.
all the student athletes that are interested in your specific school they go there and it's taught by the school's specific coaching staff, right? And sometimes it's usually maybe one day at the most. It just depends. But
Okay.
oftentimes, especially for the more savvy colleges, they incorporate admissions ish things with it. So when I was at F&M, for example, we'd have camps, clinics all the time with field hockey, soccer, lacrosse, in which the morning was the athletics piece. They had scrimmages, they had instruction with the coaches, and then the afternoon they had maybe a campus tour. They might have an information session led by a member of the admissions office. They might have a panel of current students talk about, I don't know, postgraduate success for their alumni. So that's the biggest difference between that and like a showcase is just the sheer size of it, right? You'll have a bunch more people that are kind of casting a wider net, whereas the ID clinic can be something that can be construed as, oh, I'm focusing on these specific places. I'm having more face time with my potential coach in college. So it's just a matter of kind of narrowing it down as opposed to casting a wider net. And does that make sense?
Yeah, and the camps are only attended by students who are interested in playing a sport in college. That's the point of these camps.
For recruitment, yes, but then I know what you're asking. So, oftentimes they would host camps for kids, right? Like elementary and middle school. That's very different than a recruitment camp for high schoolers, right? Me growing up, I would go to Southwestern University as my hometown's college. I went to the basketball camps, the baseball camps, the soccer camps when I was in second or third grade, right? Very different than if I was a high school sophomore going to a ID camp at a specific school. So that's why this phrase can be a little bit hard to understand because they're oftentimes used interchangeably. They can
Hmm.
mean one thing in one sport versus another thing, but there are a wide variety of camps. We're talking more about the recruitment specific
Okay.
camps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I just I was picturing like when I think of a camp, I think of it as being like a week long and that kind of stuff. And so I was just trying to understand this. And yeah, sorry, I'm very new to all of this athletic recruitment, and it seems to vary so much by sport too, which makes it super confusing as well, you know. Um,
Okay. And we had another question about, oh, encouraging students to apply ED versus RD, or if some schools have ED, early decision, early action, regular decision. So I guess you kind of walk us through what that process is like to in talking to students about the application round. So I'll open up the floor to y'all three.
I would just say you should definitely go ED to whatever is your top school. I think it gives you a great shot to be at the school you want to be at, and then you kind of know where you fit with that school, whether it's a positive or it's going to happen or not. Um, and I think if you were going to apply with athletics being involved, you have every opportunity to ask that coach, Coach, if I apply early decision to your school, will you support my application? And they should be able to tell you yes, or things look positive, or hey, we got the green light from admissions. There should be some type of communication back that things look good. If that coach cannot give you kind of some type of positive reinforcement, then my guess would be you're not getting into school and that you should look at other places. So we urge all the time when kids are like, oh, I'm really interested in these three Ivy League schools, and I'm calling my buddies at those Ivy League schools and they don't even know who the kid is. I'm telling them, hey, ask that coach, are they going to support your application? If they can't tell you yes, kind of got to read between the lines of where you're at. And I tell kids all the time too, if it's not Wesleyan, that's okay. But I would take the shot at Amherst or Williams or Denison or whatever it is, to see if you can, get that shot at getting an 81. That a lot of schools have an early decision two round, and I think again I would do that. I think regular decision when they start going through all the things they need at all these elite schools, there's not that many spots left. I think it's highly, highly competitive at that time.
Yeah, and you mentioned the phrase supporting you in the admissions process, right? That's a key, like it's as close to like a magic phrase as possible, right? Because the worst thing you want to hear as a student athlete is, oh, if you get in, you'll be on the team. Like, well, okay, well, what am I doing here? I'm still have to get into school. It's a lack of faith by that coach. But if they say I'm supporting you, that means they are putting their weight behind you because there's only a certain number of these supports or slots, whatever nomenclature you use in that process when the school meets as the admissions committee. Oh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
would.
Joe, can you talk a little bit more about the academic index again, please? I think we had some, I guess, clarification on that and make how it differs maybe from school to school and sport to sport.
Yeah, I think Dan will probably could speak better to it. I'm more just in charge of kind of getting everybody going. Our head
Okay,
coach,
yeah,
they,
yeah,
they
Dan,
handle that a
yeah.
little bit more. I will say, like to Dan's point about like make sure you ask coaches where you stand. That's a very fair question. You like the coaches are trying to figure out their interest in the student athletes, but like the student athletes need to figure out their interest from the coaches as well. It's a very fair question. If you're asking every week, that's probably not a good strategy, but like if you feel like something's off or you feel like something's stalling, like don't be afraid to ask the question. Like these are people that, if there's parents on too, like these are people that you're handing your kid off to. Like you want to feel like that level of trust is there. So if you feel like you ask that question and you're getting weird responses, like that's important information to know. So you really should ask those questions. And the answer might be like, hey, you're not one of the top choices now, but like you're someone we like and we're talking to, and we're going to see like we're waiting on a couple spots. Like, see, ask the question though. Like, you don't have the information unless you ask. So, like, really, really, like, ditto what Dan said because I think that's really important, especially as you start to get in the weeds of it in the summer and onward.
And I think the simplest term on the academic index, or people hear AI for short, is strictly it's your transcript and your GPA is one half it, and then your test scores is the other. Right now in football for the Ivy League this year, every school is now taking standardized tests again, so SAT or ACT, except for Columbia. So it definitely helps Columbia potentially get a kid that might be in a lower band seen as higher. But they super score the SAT and the ACT. So again, if the higher you do in your testing, the higher you can be the academic index, and the more spots you'll qualify for at all these schools. So if you are a good test taker, I would suggest taking it a couple times. If you're not, I would make sure that your transcript's strong and you're trying to maximize that 80 points the best you can. But the higher academically you do, the more spots you qualify for at all these schools, and the more opportunity you'll have at all these schools. And kind of the less athletic you almost have to be. If a positive is if you're a really good athlete and you're maybe on the lower side academically and you know a school's taking you, they're taking you with the intent that they think you're going to be pretty good pretty quick, or else they're not making good decisions. But the academic index,
Sliding scale essentially, right?
yep,
You
yep.
have to maintain this number. How you get there depends on who you bring in, right? Whether it's athletically or academically too.
Yeah, but even for us in football, we're test optional. If a
Yeah,
student has to be a 32 or higher ACT or 1420 higher SAT, or we do not submit. So
yeah,
it's that high of a scale even for football players. So
yeah.
it's pretty
And
competitive.
then in the pre-read, they'll usually say if the
Don't
score is
submit it.
below that, they should apply. They're not going to say, "Oh, man." They're trying to eliminate as much abstract language as possible. I saw it firsthand where we said, "Oh, it's a high possible, low possible." No, we scrapped that saying yes or no. If it's this or better, submit. That or below, don't submit because we are a test optional school with most D3s at the high academic level, unless you're talking about the big STEM schools are test optional and they really are a genuine test optional school. So, okay. That's the last question I saw. So I will go ahead and wrap this up. But on behalf of Dan, Mo, and Joe, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about this topic or future topics, feel free to reach out to me personally. You have my information and have a good rest of the night.